In today's video, we're going to be taking this simple Kratos tank and making it a defender of the first wall. We will turn it from this into this. All hail Rogel Dawn and the last wall, because this is how we paint the glorious Imperial Fists! Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is actually see if this model is ready to be painted. I know that may seem a weird statement, but the last thing you want to do is actually paint a model and find out that you've got mold lines all over it. So what I'm doing now, I'm actually checking the tank to see if there's no mold lines anywhere. I'm happy with everything on the tank before I actually go in and put down that first layer of primer. Again, the worst thing you can do is actually paint something that is not ready to be painted. So just go over your model once and check it all out. As you can see with this model, where the orange is, there was a lot of gaps a part of this. So what I did, I went in and I filled those gaps in. So when I come to paint it, it doesn't look like a gappy mess at the top of the tank. Now, if you're happy with how your model looks, it's time to prime your model. And there's a few ways to do this. The first way is with a spray can. Now, this is a Halford spray can. I recommend Halfords. They're cheap, they're fast, and they're great spray cans. You can get primers in all different colors. Absolutely fantastic brand. The second way of doing it is actually using an airbrush, and this is what I'm going to be using for this one. I've got the Vallejo Surface Primer. It is by far the best primer I've personally used, so that's why I use it on all of my stuff. Jumping forward, it's now time to put that primer on, and I've got this cool little swiveling platform to help me do this. If you guys want this, then I'll include the link to it in the description of this video over on Amazon. But all I did, I put my primer in my airbrush, and then I can just swirl this around and get from all the angles. I wait for it to dry, and then I flip the tank upside down and then do the bottom half of the tank as well. It's a really, really cool thing to do, especially with tanks of this size, because this Kratos tank actually is a very, very big tank. Now, I know what someone's going to say. They're going to say, Valrak, why the hell are you priming in black? Black is probably not the best primer to use if you want to achieve a good yellow. And the answer I can only give you is that this was something that I just did randomly. I just started to prime in black, and I just went on from there. A lot of people since then have gone, are you a madman? Why are you not using white? You probably could use white, but again, I've learned that to prime in black actually darkens that Avalon Sunset on top of it a little bit, and then when you put that glaze or that glaze effect on top, which we'll get to later on in the video, it really brings it out a little bit more. I know maybe that's not true, but it's a method to the madness in my head, and I've always stuck with priming in black. And as you can see on the video now, it goes on perfectly. I'm getting a nice coat all the way over the model, not too thick, not too much. The really good thing about this Vallejo primer is that it dries very, very fast, and it's a matte one as well, so it actually, you know, it has a nice surface texture to it once it dries. I think it's a great primer, as I mentioned previously in the video. So what I'm going to do now is just finish priming all this model, and then we'll come back and we'll prime some other aspects of the tank. And as you can see in the background, we are doing the top of the turret here. Just the same method. I got these really cool handles from A-Case, and the magnetic. I've got a little magnet actually up there in the turret, and it sticks to it, and I can spin it round and get all the angles in one go. Again, just putting the primer on, not too much, just making it look nice and neat. And then once it's all dry, we can start hitting it with that next stage of doing yellow. And once it is dry, this is what it looks like. There we go. The primer has done its job. It's primed the model, and we are now ready to move on to that next stage. This is why I love using Vallejo. You can see like the quality of the primer on there. It looks nice, it looks cool, and the next coat of paint is going to stick to that absolutely perfectly. I even did the underneath of the tank. I know a lot of people don't do that, but I do, because I've got a weird thing where it's not complete if I don't do it. Now the next stage is getting that yellow on, and there's a few ways to get the yellow on. This is probably one of the most important parts of actually getting a good looking Imperial Fist model. Now the first way to do it is with Avalon Sunset, and I know what you got to be saying, Valrak, there's no more Avalon Sunset. What can I do? Why are you suggesting this method? If you can get Avalon Sunset, use Avalon Sunset. But there is also another way what you can use to actually achieve the Avalon Sunset, and it's this: Colourforge Sunset Yellow. This is basically a 1-for-1 of Avalon Sunset. As far as I'm aware, you can only get this in the UK and certain EU countries. I think it's going to be coming over to the US and Canada very, very soon, but please go over to their website, send them an email and check it out. I'll include the links to everything that I'm using in the description, including this Colourforge Sunset. For this one, we're not actually going to be using Colourforge Sunset. I'm actually going to be using another method. So the method that I'm going to be using is quite simple. I'm basically going to get a base coat of Avalon Sunset, as you can see in the background, and I'm actually going to mix this with a airbrush thinner, put it in there, shake it about, and I get a nice consistency then of Avalon Sunset. You can see like the airbrush thinner I'm using, again, it's a Vallejo thinner. Again, they are one of the best ones I've used, so that's why I'm sticking to what I know. Once I put that airbrush thinner in there, I mix it about. You want to get like a milk type of consistency to your paint before you put it in an airbrush. Once you've achieved that, then put it in your airbrush and it's ready to start spraying the Avalon. Now the next stage is, of course, my favorite stage. This is where I start to put the yellow on the tank. And if you notice what I'm doing in the background, I'm building the yellow up. You're probably going to need maybe 2 or 3 layers of Avalon, especially on a black primer, as I mentioned. I'm just going around, just getting some of like the top areas. Sorry for my big, massive sausage hands in the background. I tried to change the camera to a better position so I can actually show this off a little bit better. But you can see as I'm going around, I'm just spraying the Avalon on. Again, this is the Avalon mix right off the base coat. Going in, spraying it all on, getting it all up there, all in the creases, all in the cracks, all in the top areas. It's just basically saying what I do with the primer. I'm just going to put that base layer on, wait for it to dry, then hit it again in certain areas where I feel I actually missed. And if you've done it correctly, then this is what it should be looking like. This is only my first coat of Avalon. Yes, there is some places which I can see already where I haven't hit it, but I'm going to wait for this layer of paint to dry. Once it dries, then I'll hit it with another layer of Avalon. The worst thing you can do is actually start spraying a model which is already wet with paint. What will happen, you'll form like little pools, and those pools will dry, and you'll be able to see that on the model when you come to do the next stages. So just wait for the model to be dry. Patience is a key when it comes to painting yellow. Best thing to do while you wait is actually just move on to other things. You can see I'm doing the top of the turret at the moment, getting all underneath, all the places which is going to be visible to the human eye to see. Probably not underneath is going to be visible here, but just like I said before, I like to do everywhere because I've got this weird thing where if I know it's not complete, I just can't put it on the tabletop. So yeah, just going over just what I did with the tank, getting all the top bits sorted, and getting that first base coat of Avalon on there. And this is what it should end up looking like. So this was around 2 to 3 coats of Avalon through my airbrush, and it's covered the model fantastically well. One of the main things which I keep mentioning is getting that perfect base coat of yellow. Once you have achieved that, then it's plain sailing. That is the hardest thing, to make the yellow look good on your model. When you put it through the airbrush, it's the easiest way to do it. You can see the top bit of the tank as well. That's all done. Again, this took around 2 coats of Avalon, but it really makes it pop. It really makes it stand out. And the next thing to this, which is, you know, the most tedious thing, is this. It is Avgrak's Earthshade. So what we're going to do with the Avgrak's Earthshade is basically going to do a recess wash, a panel line, I think it's mostly called these days, where we go in, we put it all through the tank, all the little like rivets and stuff like that. That all gets a nice wash of Avalon, and that adds depth to the model then, and it really brings out a personality. It starts to have a character on the tabletop. Now I've zoomed in on the model because I just want to give you a little preview of what I mean by using the Avgraks. As you can see, I'm going around each rivet of the tank. Again, I apologize for my massive sausage fingers. The camera angle is not the best, please forgive me, but this is, again, one of the most tedious stages now of the model, going in, going round, hitting it everywhere and making it have that little bit more of depth, because once you do this, it really does make the tank stand out a lot more. And once you've done all that panel lining, this is what you should be looking like. You can see all the rivets, everything's done, and now we move on to the most glorious stage, that is the glazing. And this is what I use to glaze my tanks. Lamenter's Yellow, the forbidden fruit of Games Workshop paints. Now, I know what you're going to say, just like what you said with Avalon Sunset. Valrak, where can I get this? You own it all, Valrak. It doesn't exist anymore. Where there is a way where you can now have Lamenter's Yellow glaze. You can actually make it yourself. There is a tutorial over on YouTube by a chap called Hidalgo Miniatures. I'll include the link to that video in the description. I'll also put the thumbnail up on the screen now in case you need to look for it. And basically that chap tells you how to make your own glaze. It's to do with inks and water and the consistency of them both. Watch it all and you'll be able to make your own Lamenter's glaze. Not just Lamenter's glaze, he does like the GW blue one, the green one, and the red one as well, just in case you need to make more glazes in different colors. Now we're going to apply this the same way that we applied the Avalon Sunset. We're going to build it up in layers, so you can see me pouring it. Oh, look at it all there. Oh, the forbidden fruit, as I like to call it. So basically I'm going to put one layer down, let that dry, fully let it dry, and then hit it with another layer. And then what you do, leave it for a day, probably less than a day, let it all proper dry, and it should come out as a rich yellow. You've seen it in the background now, how yellow the tank goes with the glaze. Again, I'm sorry with my massive bloody sausage fingers. Make sure this doesn't pool though if you're doing it with an airbrush, because this is basically like water, this glaze. You don't want to spray too much on over one place. If that does happen, just get a paintbrush and just brush it out a little bit. Just don't let it pool, because then the pools will be showing up as like big blotches of glaze on your model. Again, take your time, don't rush it, go around and just fill all those gaps in on the yellow, and you should have a fantastic model at the end of it. I know a lot of people ask me, do I do the airbrush with actual miniatures? I actually use the paintbrush when I come to glaze miniatures. I feel like there's a lot of wastage when you use a airbrush like on a single marine, whereas with a paintbrush you can just dip it into the pot and paint it on. I do it with tanks because it covers better, it covers faster, it covers better, so that's why I'm just using an airbrush for this method on this tank. But if you're using just a single character, then I would suggest, yes, use a paintbrush. And once you finish doing the glazing, you can see here my tank, this is 2 layers worth of glaze, and I think it looks pretty nice. I love that rich yellow that you get with the glaze. If you can see like all the shading now, all the panel lining and stuff, that's been taken over by the glaze. It actually nulls it down a little bit. Like before, if you go back, it looked kind of bright, that panel lining, but once you put the glaze on there, it fades it down a bit, and it just works. Well, for me, it works. Again, I would like to get your thoughts and feedback. Do you think this glazing method is a really good method? Do you like the way it looks with this yellow? Again, for me, I absolutely love how the yellow turns out when you glaze it. I really hope that Games Workshop does bring glazing back in some type of way, and actually they may have done that, because as I've been recording this video, a lot of other content creators have been releasing the new contrast paint, and one of them in there is the Imperial Fist one, and I've heard if you water that down, it can act like a glaze. I haven't tested it yet, so that's why I'm not going to recommend it. I don't want you to ruin your models or anything like that, but it's going to be interesting to see if that actually is a viable option in the future. And I just wanted to include this in the background. I wanted to show off the before and after. So on the left side, we have the non-panel lined, non-glazed model, and on the right side, we have the panel lined and glazed model. You can just see how rich the yellow is compared to what it looks like when you're first going to spray it. So if you get that kind of color that's on the left, fear not, after you've done the glazing, after you've done the panel lining, this is the result that you're going to end up with. And the next stage now is basically just putting more colors on the model. I'm going to go away now, I'm going to put silvers on the treads, I'm going to add some black paint to the model because black and yellow is the king when it comes to doing Imperial Fists. And just bring the model alive a little bit more and add some decals and, of course, some battle damage as well. And here I am basically just putting some silvers onto the tracks and stuff. Again, this is very, very tedious. It's going to be a lot of time doing this, but just take your time. Don't rush it. Go over with a few thin layers as I've been doing. I'm just getting it all out there, all down, making sure I get in all the little places. I'm sure you're going to think that you finished painting these treads and then you're going to look and you're going to be like, oh my holy emperor, I've missed a bit. Just again, take your time, enjoy it, and just power through it. And you should end up with something like this. Again, we are not complete at this moment in time. I put some of the main base colors on, you know, the silver, blacks to break up that model. I've shaded some of the silver areas like the treads and stuff, as you can see. I still haven't yet put the battle damage on, which is a big factor, a part of these models, but I just want to show you off at this stage what it should be looking like. You can see the turret, all the colors on there. It's basically down to you really how you want to go in and break this model up. I've put it like, you know, like certain blacks in certain places to break up just like the massive yellow, the silvers in certain places, but it's entirely up to you. If you want to put stripes on there, if you want to do like a big chunk of it, like just like entirely black, it's up to you where your mind can take you. Now the next stage, as I just previously mentioned, is the battle damage phase, and to achieve this I use a thing called Sterling Mud. Yes, that is it right there. And I also use one of these brushes. It's not a brush, it's a sponge, and I go around and I dab it all around the model. Now I'm not going to show it off in this video because I basically have a video dedicated entirely to this over on my channel, which I'll include in the link in the description, which goes into far more detail and shows you how to do this properly. And once you've done all that, this is the result that you should have. This is the finished Kratos tank. This is the finished Imperial Fist color scheme. Now, how to paint Imperial Fist completed. You can see the front of the tank, all the lenses I've done. I got the template the decal there to hintering back to 30k, the 7th Legion symbol. I've got like the little eagle with lightning bolts on there because the Imperial Fists are so loyal. They are literally the Emperor's chosen. But everything is on there now. Everything works. I'm happy how everything looks. I don't want to put more colors on there. I don't want to overdo the model. I think that's one of the worst things you can do. But basically, this is how I paint my yellow. This can be applied to anything. You can do this for Marines, tanks as you've seen, Stormbirds, Thunderhawks, anything that you can imagine as yellow, you can use this color scheme to achieve this yellow. The battle damage, of course, which is added onto it. Hopefully you've just gone and watched that video. But yeah, this is it. This is how you paint Imperial Fist the Valrak way. I just want to say thank you for everyone for watching the tutorial if you're here at the end. This is something that I'm not really like familiar with doing tutorials. I've always classed myself when it comes to my paint schemes as tabletop standard, nothing fancy what you see from like all these other 40k channels, which are absolutely just amazing works of art paint jobs. I appreciate it if you could share this video around to anyone who's starting an Imperial Fist armor and maybe point them towards my direction. Say, hey, have you seen how Valrak does his? If you've got any thoughts, feedback, anything like that, any more questions you want, then post it down below in the comment section and I'll do my best to respond and point you in the right direction and give you any advice or any feedback on your models. Thank you for coming. Thank you for watching this video. See you now. Have a great day and bye-bye.